Welcome, everyone, to the City National Bank's Strategies for a Cyber-Safe Work Environment, Fundamentals to Improve Defense Against Attacks. I appreciate you joining us. We'll just take about 15 minutes and go through some best practices for you and your small business. My name is Brian Fricke. I'm the Managing SVP and Chief Information Security Officer at City National Bank. We support thousands of clients around the country, and we're glad that you joined us today. Just a little legalese reminder, this is intended for informational purposes. If you ever do need direct contact or advice and support, we encourage you to find a local provider who can do hands-on or face-to-face interactions with you and your teams to implement any and all of the best practices we're going to cover today. We also encourage you to visit our fraud and security page. You can see there right now, actually, with your phones, you could use that to scan that QR code, or you can visit our website at citynational.com. On here, you're going to find a lot of great resources. You'll learn about scams and about other counter measures to defend against that. So we encourage you to visit the website, or like I said, you could take a scan of this. We'll show this QR code a little later in the presentation as well. All right, so what we're going to cover first is a couple quick little statistics on the evolving cyber environment, and then we'll jump into some of the common fraud trends in the workplace and some of the mitigations that you can use and those best practices to help improve the security of your own environment and keep your business rolling. So real quick on the evolving cyber environment, cyber attack trends continue in 2023. 2/3 of organizations were affected in some way by a ransomware attack. That could be that their computer was seized up or their data was encrypted and they were extorted for money to be able to gain access to that. It can affect their operations and reputation. And so we encourage you to be really mindful of, are you susceptible to a ransomware attack? And are you doing the right things to prevent the impact of a ransomware attack? Abuse of valid credentials accounted for 45% of data breaches. That means the bad guys got access to the keys and they let themselves in the front door, as opposed to hacking you through some sophisticated means or using some overly sophisticated attack. So really understanding who has access to your environment is critical, and who has those keys and how they're being managed within your environment. 56% reported they had a security awareness program, and that's great, but that's not nearly enough. Every organization, at least when you onboard new employees, maybe once a year, you should be going over those attack types. Some of the information we're covering today, they should understand how to look for a phishing email, how to understand what social engineering is, and how to avoid it. So now we'll get into some common fraud trends in the workplace. So some of the most common scams, and hopefully you've heard of these before, but phishing and smishing, right? That is basically an email or a text that you might be receiving where somebody is trying to trick you into giving up information, right? They want you to click a link, they want you to open a file, they want you to respond back with maybe sensitive information, and otherwise, that's how they're typically negotiating their way into an organization's technology environment. Business email compromise is some of the net outcomes. They could gain access to your email. They might be, you might have gotten a prompt to scan a QR code or to approve a multi-factor, access for somebody, and not knowing who it was, you clicked the link anyway. And that could lead to a business email compromise. That is somebody sitting in your Gmail, in your work email, observing the goings, the backs and forths, and communications you might have with your suppliers, communications you have with your clients, and communications that you have with your bank. So when you send instructions to make a change to payments or wire, that person, that bad guy, could be sitting there waiting for that email exchange to occur, and they may change those instructions, and you may never see it. So it's important to make sure you've not been compromised, and you're doing the right things to prevent access to your own email systems. We already talked about ransomware attacks. Again, most of the time that's going to start by the receipt of some sort of email and a person interacting with that email, with that file, with that link, leading to a ransomware compromise. Finally, just really briefly, check fraud. Check fraud is on the rise. It's really one of the most prominent fraud types. Checks are stolen out of your outbox and your inbox, or directly from the USPS, right, from the mail carriers themselves. So we encourage you to start to wean off of checks. Try to use wires, ACH, other means through your banks to make these payments more secure. In fact, I think in Australia, they plan to phase out checks completely over the next 5 years. So check fraud, again, It's easy once they've acquired them to wash them, to scrub them, to alter them, and they do sell them the images on the dark web and otherwise. So I encourage you to try to look at how you make payments and try to stay away from using checks going forward. So let's talk about how to identify phishing. You really should develop a spidey sense over time as you look at these emails that are unsolicited. That's typically the first indicator, right? You never interacted with this person. Now, if they are a victim of a business email compromise, right, the bad guy could be sending you an email on their behalf with this information. But one of the first things to check is, do I know this person, right? Am I expecting this email? You also often will see this sense of urgency they're trying to generate within you to interact with that link to respond back with some sort of information. So the unrecognized nature of the person, the sense of urgency, and then you can also look for again unsolicited invoices, unsolicited documents that you might be receiving. More and more, they're using AI to write the emails. We used to be able to look at it from a kind of cultural context perspective, spelling errors, things like that. These days, the use of AI allows these emails to be very, very well crafted and sometimes highly targeted. So phishing emails are more generic. Spear phishing is more specific and targeted. So depending on how you interact with your emails, you may see one or both of these types of attacks. We also encourage you to look into running your own phishing simulations to try to help encourage your employees, help them recognize that, help them give them an opportunity to recognize these things. I know here at this organization, we run phishing simulations very often. Almost every organization that I interact with has established some sort of phishing awareness and training program. And so we encourage you to look into that. There are free resources on the CISA, DHS websites. We encourage you to look into those. Looking at smishing, just an example of smishing, you'll see very common, whether it could be from your bank or purportedly from a bank. It could be that it comes from DHS or maybe a FedEx. It's a package, a tracking, some sort of tracking number. And it'll prompt you to try to call a number, to click a link, right? Again, trying to get you to interact with that hook, right? It's just like when you go fishing for real. So you want to be mindful again. Do I know this number? Am I expecting this kind of interaction? And just by and large, my rule of thumb is don't interact with it at all. A lot of people will delete it and report it as junk. That's probably the best way to go about it. I would not use the reaction. You can say back to them, stop. Sometimes you can unsubscribe from certain campaigns that are legitimate. But when the bad guys are trying to smish you, interacting with that message can be risky. So we encourage you to just delete it and report it to your security personnel if you do have a security function. But otherwise, not interacting with them is always the best case. Talking a little bit more about a business email compromise and how those work. First, the bad guy is going to try to do some research on your company. They're going to try to understand who your employees are and interact with them through some sort of social engineering. They're going to try to gain access to could be a Gmail hosted environment, a Microsoft hosted email environment. And if you have not set up multi-factor authentication, it could be very easy for the bad guys to gain that access. From there, they will try to take some sort of action, right? Whether it be a wire transfer, it could be that they're soliciting. The amount of sensitive data you have in your email, if you just take a moment to think about it, you've probably got invoices, you probably have communications with your financial institution, you might have employee pay records, W-2s. There could be a lot of sensitive information just sitting in your email. So we encourage you not to use email as a system of record, not to use email for long-term storage of sensitive documentation, and to use, again, those secure means, right? Put it behind a multi-factor access mechanism, and otherwise make sure there's no auto forwarding rules set up. So check your rules on a regular basis and make sure that you've not been compromised, because from there they can do a lot of damage. They can alter wire instructions you might send to your bank. They may change communications you're sending to your clients or to your employees or to your suppliers. So we encourage you to be very mindful. This is one of probably the highest rate of compromise that we see occur with small businesses because they have not gone through those steps. They have shared credentials among their employees, things like that. So we encourage you to think about how you're managing your email environment for your company, and look out for this very specific, highly targeted, very nefarious email compromise. On to our next one. So just a quick little example of a BEC email itself. So again, it's something that's urgent, right? I think the biggest red flag for me is when they say they can't be reached, right? Very often it's, hey, I need you to take some sort of really sensitive action, but I can't talk to you right now. Every organization should have some sort of callback mechanism or verification mechanism. It's great to have dual control. So maybe one person initiates maybe some payments and another person can approve those payments. But you want to be mindful of these, even if let's say Liam Sparks was a really close friend of yours and you get these kinds of, you email that person all the time. If they have a BEC compromise, all of a sudden out of the blue, you're going to get this email, which should be out of character, right? And so this is just really, again, a way to continue to refine or add to your spidey sense, right? So that when you do get something out of the blue like this, you're thinking twice and three times about, is this legitimate or not? Pick up the phone, call them. It's better to wait and be a little delayed than to be scammed. Ransomware attacks. This is just kind of a bit about the attack timeline, right? So they're going to try to gain access to your environment, like I said, through social engineering, clicking links, clicking, get maybe it's a BEC. Once they have access to your computing environment, they may try to download that malicious software or that malware. It could be ransomware, it could be a remote control application. There are many ways that they could, or other things they could do to damage your environment. But really, if you've got good backups, first of all, you have the good access controls in place, like we talked about, multi-factor authentication and other things like that in place. You can prevent this stuff from happening. If you do have a ransomware incident, you want to have already thought through who would you call, how would you handle it? So actually have a plan that's been put together and how do you respond? A part of that response would be you can restore from a backup, right? Hopefully you have what we call an immutable backup, something that can't be changed. Perhaps it's a daily backup, a weekly backup. It depends on your organization and how frequently you need to have your data backed up. And then testing that, being able to run a tabletop or actually do an actual restoration of maybe it's a database that you use, could be a client database, could be operational environments, but you'll want to go through those motions and make sure, can you recover if you did have a ransomware incident? But ultimately, the bad guys are trying to get you to pay them money, right? They really want your data so they can make money. They want your money so they can have money, right? Or they want to somehow force you to give them some sort of funding. A lot of them will they'll take a far lesser payment even if you did get compromised because they just want the money. And so it's up to you as a owner, as a business owner, as the business managers, to make sure you've thought through these things. Again, have a plan, practice the plan, test the plan. Planning is key. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure with regard to ransomware. All right, some additional security best practices. So one thing you want to do for your environment is understand what is sensitive. What are your critical assets? This is basically a really broad stroke of the types of what we would consider sensitive data. And that can range from the person identifiable information of your employees, of your clients. It could be the non-public financial information that your financial institutions produce for you or about you, or that you provide to them. Especially in the furtherance of loans or for other financial services. Account credentials, right? Those certainly are considered sensitive information. So you want to be mindful of how those are being managed. If they're being emailed back and forth or texted back and forth, that's plain text. It's out in the open. You want to be mindful of who actually can see and read those. Intellectual property that might belong to your organization, all that's considered very valuable, especially if you're building your business. And then there's, of course, the physical environment you have, making sure that you've got the right controls in place for that as well. So all of this could be sensitive. All of these would be considered your assets, the things you want to protect. But if you haven't gone through and thought about what constitutes sensitive information or sensitive data for your environment, you'll be behind the power curve when you're trying to wrap around protections for where that data is stored. Password security. So you get into, what is a good password, right? A strong password. Most of the time, really, these days, it's about the length of the password being more important than the complexity, and that's because of the amount of compute power it takes to crack the hash, as they say. And so, think about it. You want to have maybe a 13 to 16 length password, because if that hash is compromised, it takes a lot more difficult for the bad guys to crack that password. But beyond a password, that multi-factor authentication, it's probably the 18th time I've said it. You definitely want to use MFA where possible. And so we'll jump right into a little bit of what that can look like. When you set up multi-factor authentication, what you're doing is you're making it not just the username password, something they know, but it's another out-of-band mechanism, right? So it's typically a token that can be an SMS. Sometimes it can be like a text message, but it's another mechanism requiring you to have something in your possession, like the phone or access to the token itself. And so something you know and something you have, that is two different factors. If it's if it's a date of birth and a password and and a zip code and all these things, those are the things I know. That's one factor. So you want to have this additional factor. And then there's other factors as well. So something you know, something you have. Biometrics is something you are. So it could be a fingerprint, could be a facial recognition on your computer, could be mechanisms like that. And there's also somewhere you are. You could have geofencing using global positioning to identify where is that device in the world, and I have geofenced it, so if it only can come from a particular area in the world. So there's different ways to implement MFA. The most common are to use one of the MFA services. We have Google authenticators, Microsoft authenticators. Those are free services, and you can use those to register with most of the digital services you consume on the internet. And so we encourage you MFA all day. Okay. All right. Moving along. So now we get into some cyber hygiene discussions. It's one thing to protect the access to the environment, but you also want to make sure applying patches. So if you have, it depends if you have one computer and you're a sole business owner, or you've got 1,000 computers and you're running a mid-sized business. You want to make sure that the devices have been configured correctly, and you want to turn on auto update, make sure that the Microsoft patches are being applied on a routine and regular basis. These are the habits you want to create in your environment so that you have a clean, we call high degree of cyber hygiene. If you don't patch timely, it could lead to a compromise because of some sort of external, you're interfacing with the internet. And so the bad guy, you might come across a website that has a malicious link, or you might follow, inevitably leads you to somewhere where the bad guys can just shotgun out the malware and your machine is susceptible because it's not been patched. So again, cyber hygiene, really critical to stay clean in this environment. All right, so looking at by the numbers again, right? 64% of organizations were infected with ransomware and actually paid the ransom. So we don't want you to fall victim of that. The reason they had to pay, because they probably didn't have good backups, right? They weren't able to restore their operations and they were forced to make that payment. Payments can range dramatically. For a small organization, you might get away with maybe a $50,000 ransomware. For larger organizations, it could be in the multiple millions. And so we just don't want you to fall victim to a ransomware attack or be extorted in that way. So we encourage you. We actually have put together a ransomware preparation, prevention, and mitigation guide. So it's also available on our website, citynational.com. But a quick little QR code for you to scan and download that document. It has a lot of great tips for how more technically specific you can begin to protect your environment. But again, information only. We encourage you to work with a licensed professional or a seasoned professionals local to your area that can help you improve your security posture. Additional resources. So we always love to point people to the CISA.gov website. There's plenty of great information on how to maintain your cyber hygiene, the awareness and training, all kinds of different communications are available there. It's a fantastic website for improving your own cyber awareness and training activities and employee awareness activities. And then finally, the FTC, they have a great website supporting small businesses with regard to cybersecurity. So those resources, I think, are also available on our website. Well, thank you for joining us. Again, talk to your relationship manager, reach out to us, engage with us. We'd love to talk with you and help you understand not only what products and services we have available, but how we can help you continue to improve your own resiliency, cyber resiliency, and stay safe in this very competitive and sometimes scary world. But we're here to support you, and we have your back. So thank you for joining us today, and have a great one.